Classified Incident Report, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Date, redacted. Officer, Tavern Wren, Nuclear Launch Control Specialist. Clearance level, cosmic/compartmentalized. Audio log transcript, personal recording device number 47 Alpha. The coffee was still warm when the first anomaly appeared on my console. I remember that detail because it's the last normal thing I can recall with absolute certainty. Everything after that moment feels like watching someone else's life through a scratched lens, distorted and wrong in ways I'm still trying to comprehend. My name is Tavern Wren. I've been a nuclear launch control officer at Cheyenne Mountain Complex for 8 years, 3 months, and 16 days. I know those numbers precisely because I've been counting them like a rosary, hoping the routine would anchor me to something real. Before today, I believed in the system. I believed in the chain of command, in the protocols that kept our weapons safe, in the voices that spoke through our secured channels with the authority of eagles and stars. I don't believe in anything anymore. The shift began at 0600 hours, standard rotation. The mountain's belly hummed with its usual mechanical rhythm, a sound like sleeping giants breathing through steel lungs. 2 miles of granite and reinforced concrete separated us from the Colorado morning, but down here in the depths, time moved differently. The fluorescent lights never dimmed, the air never changed, and the screens never stopped their vigilant glowing. My station occupied the northeast corner of the primary control room, a semicircle of monitors and keyboards that could, with the right authentication codes, unleash enough nuclear fire to crack the planet's spine. The responsibility should have felt heavier, but routine had worn it smooth. 8 years of watching screens, running diagnostics, and waiting for orders that never came. 8 years of peace. The anomaly started small. A single pixel flickering on monitor 3, the one displaying authentication protocols. Just a tiny square of light pulsing between green and black, like a dying firefly. I rubbed my eyes, thinking fatigue was playing tricks on me. Night shifts always made the world feel less solid. Status report, Wren. Commander Yarrick Dusk's voice cut through the control room's artificial quiet. He stood behind my station, coffee mug in hand, looking like he'd already been awake for hours. Yarrick was career military, the kind of man who pressed his uniforms with geometric precision and spoke in regulation cadences. His presence usually steadied me, but something in his expression seemed different today, sharper, more alert. "All systems nominal, sir," I replied, my fingers dancing across the keyboard to pull up the morning diagnostics. Minor display glitch on monitor 3, but nothing critical. Yarrick nodded, but his eyes lingered on the flickering pixel longer than seemed necessary. "Keep an eye on it. We've had reports of unusual electronic interference from NORAD upstairs." That should have been my first warning. In 8 years, I'd never heard of interference affecting our systems. The mountain's shielding could withstand electromagnetic pulses, solar flares, and direct nuclear strikes. What kind of interference could penetrate 2 miles of stone? I made a note in my log and continued the morning routine. Systems check, authentication verification, communication protocols. Everything proceeding according to manual specifications. The pixel kept flickering, but I told myself it was just a hardware issue. Nothing that couldn't wait for the next maintenance cycle. At 0647 hours, my secure phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed a familiar extension, Avalise Moon, my sister, calling from the Emergency Broadcasting Center in Denver. Avalise worked the early morning shift, coordinating with stations across the region to ensure emergency alert systems functioned properly. She was the responsible one in our family, the one who'd chosen a career in public safety, while I'd opted for weapons of mass destruction. "Tavern, you okay? You sound tired." Her voice carried that familiar note of concern she'd used since we were kids. "Just another thrilling morning in the bunker," I said, keeping my voice low. Personal calls weren't exactly prohibited, but they weren't encouraged either. "What's up? Weird morning here. We've been getting test signals from Washington that don't match our scheduled protocols. The authentication codes look right, but the timing is off. My supervisor wants me to verify with military channels." My fingers paused over the keyboard. "What kind of timing issues?" "The signals are coming in with timestamps that don't match when we're receiving them, like they're being sent from a different time zone or..." She paused. "This is going to sound crazy, but it's like they're coming from the future. The flickering pixel on monitor 3 pulsed brighter for just a moment, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Run a full diagnostic on your systems. Could be a glitch in your internal clocks. Already did. Everything checks out on our end. Look, I know you can't tell me much about what goes on down there, but if something's happening... Nothing's happening, AV. Just run your protocols and file a report if the anomalies continue. I ended the call, but her words echoed in my mind. Timestamps from the future. The flickering pixel seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. At 0652 hours, the first emergency alert came through. The klaxon's wail filled the control room, and every screen simultaneously switched to the emergency broadcast protocol. Red letters blazed across black backgrounds. Incoming priority transmission. Presidential authorization required. This was it. The moment we'd trained for. The scenario we'd rehearsed countless times. My hands moved to the authentication keyboard, muscle memory guiding me through the preliminary security checks. Around the control room, other officers were doing the same, their faces reflecting the same mixture of adrenaline and professional calm. The transmission crackled through our speakers, distorted by encryption layers and distance. But the voice that emerged was unmistakably presidential. The same measured cadence I'd heard in 1,000 press conferences, the same authoritative tone that had guided the nation through 3 years of increasingly volatile international relations. Nuclear Launch Control, this is your Commander-in-Chief. I am authorizing immediate preparatory measures for strategic nuclear response. Authentication code follows, Zulu 77 Alpha November Delta Echo. I entered the code into my terminal, waiting for the green light that would confirm presidential authority. The system processed for what felt like an eternity, 5 seconds that stretched into geological time. When the result appeared on my screen, my blood turned to ice water. Authentication timestamp, 7:42 and 18 seconds Greenwich Mean Time. Current system time, 6:53 and 2 seconds Greenwich Mean Time. Variance, plus 49 minutes, 16 seconds. The authentication code had been generated 49 minutes in the future. I stared at the screen, my mind racing through possible explanations. System clock errors, transmission delays, solar interference. Anything except the impossible truth staring back at me from the monitor. Sir, I called to Commander Yarrick, my voice barely steady. We have a temporal variance in the authentication sequence. Yarrick moved to my station, his coffee forgotten. He studied the display, his expression unreadable. Run it again. I input the code a second time. Same result. The timestamp showed a future that hadn't happened yet, carrying the authority of a president who was apparently speaking to us from tomorrow. Could be a glitch in the encryption algorithm, Yarrick said, but his voice lacked conviction. Log the anomaly and prepare for secondary authentication. I made the required entries, but my hands were shaking now. The flickering pixel on monitor 3 had spread, becoming a small cluster of unstable light that pulsed like a digital heartbeat. Something was wrong with our systems, something that went deeper than simple malfunctions. As I reached for my phone to call Avalise back, one final detail caught my attention. The emergency alert was still displaying on the main screen, but now I noticed something I'd missed in the initial rush of adrenaline. The message header showed a transmission origin code I'd never seen before. Source, POTUS/mobile/classified ultra. In 8 years of service, I'd never seen the president broadcast from a mobile platform. Presidential communications always came through hardened, stationary facilities with known origin codes. But this signal was coming from somewhere else entirely, somewhere that didn't exist in any manual I'd ever read. I looked at the timestamp again. 49 minutes in the future. My coffee had gone cold, and the mountain's mechanical breathing seemed to skip a beat. Classified incident report, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Date, redacted. Officer, Tavern Wren, Nuclear Launch Control Specialist. Clearance level, cosmic/compartmentalized. Audio log transcript, personal recording device number 47 Alpha. Continuation, 0712 hours. The timestamp anomaly consumed the next hour of my life like a digital cancer, spreading through my thoughts until I could barely focus on routine operations. I ran 17 different diagnostic protocols, each one confirming what I already knew. Our systems were functioning perfectly, which made the impossible result even more terrifying. The flickering pixels on monitor 3 had multiplied, creating a constellation of unstable light that pulsed in patterns I couldn't decipher. Sometimes they seemed random, other times they formed shapes that looked almost like letters or numbers before dissolving back into chaos. I'd requisitioned a replacement monitor, but maintenance informed me there was a 3-day backlog for non-critical repairs. Non-critical. If they only knew. At 0718 hours, I violated protocol and called Avalise directly from my secure workstation. The mountain's communication systems were heavily monitored, but I needed to know if her emergency broadcast center was experiencing similar temporal anomalies. Personal calls from the bunker were discouraged, but I justified it as intelligence gathering. Tavern, you're calling from the mountain? Her voice carried surprise and concern in equal measure. That's not like you. I need to know more about those timestamp irregularities you mentioned. Have you seen any other anomalies in your systems? Static crackled through the connection, an unusual occurrence given our hardened communication lines. Actually, yes. We've had 3 more test signals since I talked to you. All of them with future timestamps, but here's the weird part. They're coming in exactly 49 minutes ahead of our current time. My blood turned to ice. 49 minutes? To the second. It's like someone is broadcasting from a parallel Denver where all the clocks are set wrong. She paused, and I could hear computer keyboards clicking in the background. Tavern, there's something else. The content of these test signals, they're not standard emergency protocols. They're presidential succession announcements. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. Presidential succession announcements were only transmitted during constitutional crises, when the continuity of government was threatened. I'd never seen one in 8 years of service, but the protocols were burned into my memory like religious scripture. What kind of succession announcements? Notification of executive authority transfer. Emergency powers activation. The works. But here's the really strange part. The timestamps show these announcements haven't been authorized yet. According to our logs, they're scheduled to be issued at 0807 hours today. I glanced at my workstation clock, 0721 hours. If Avalise was right, we had 46 minutes until the president would authorize emergency succession protocols. But the announcements were already being transmitted, arriving from a future that hadn't happened yet. Avalise, I need you to document everything. Save all the transmissions, preserve the metadata, and don't let anyone delete those files. Why? What's going on down there? Before I could answer, the control room's primary alert system activated. Not the general klaxon this time, but the specific tone reserved for DEFCON level changes. A deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the mountain's steel skeleton. I have to go, I whispered into the phone. Be careful, AV. And whatever you do, don't trust any emergency broadcasts that arrive early. The connection terminated, leaving me staring at screens that were now displaying information that made my hands shake. DEFCON 2 had been authorized, moving us to the second highest level of defense readiness. The authorization carried the same presidential signature codes as the morning's anomalous transmission, but this time the timestamp showed current military time. Commander Yarrick appeared at my station, his expression grim. Ren, I need you to initialize the launch preparation protocols. We've received credible intelligence about imminent nuclear threats. Sir, I need to report some irregularities in our morning authentication. Report them later. Right now, I need you focused on the mission. His voice carried an edge I'd never heard before, sharp enough to cut through steel. The President has authorized immediate preparation for strategic nuclear response. We may be the only thing standing between America and annihilation. I wanted to argue, to explain about the temporal anomalies and the impossible timestamps, but military discipline is a powerful force. My hands moved to the launch preparation keyboard, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. The procedures were so deeply ingrained that I could execute them while my mind raced through other possibilities. As I entered the preliminary codes, Monitor 3's flickering pixels suddenly organized themselves into a pattern that made my breath catch. For just a moment, they formed letters, POTUS-/UNAVLABLE. Then they dissolved back into random static. Sir, I said, my voice barely steady, I'm showing an anomaly in the presidential location authentication. The system is indicating POTUS status as unavailable. Yarrick leaned over my shoulder, studying the display. Probably a glitch in the secure location protocols. The president's exact position is compartmentalized above our clearance level. That was true, but it didn't explain why the system was showing unavailable instead of classified or restricted access. In 8 years of monitoring presidential authentication systems, I'd never seen that particular status code. I continued the launch preparation sequence, but each step felt like walking deeper into a digital nightmare. The timestamps on every authorization were consistent now, but the earlier anomaly haunted me. How could a presidential order arrive from the future? What did it mean that emergency succession protocols were being pre-authorized? At 0734 hours, my secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from the NSA's cybersecurity division. Flash priority. Potential network intrusion detected. Multiple military installations reporting authentication anomalies. Investigate all temporal variances in presidential communications. Analyst, C. Ash, contact immediately. C. Ash. I recognized the name from interagency briefings. Cyrilla Ash, one of the NSA's top cybersecurity specialists. If she was investigating authentication anomalies across multiple installations, then Cheyenne Mountain wasn't the only facility experiencing temporal irregularities. I glanced around the control room. My fellow officers were executing their assigned protocols with mechanical precision, but I noticed something unsettling. None of them seemed disturbed by the morning's events. They accepted the DEFCON 2 authorization without question, prepared launch sequences without hesitation, and treated the presidential succession protocols as routine. Was I the only one who recognized how wrong everything felt? The launch preparation sequence continued, each step bringing us closer to a point of no return. Nuclear weapons systems were coming online across the country. Submarines were receiving targeting coordinates, and intercontinental ballistic missiles were being fueled for potential launch. All based on orders that had arrived from the future, issued by a president whose location showed as unavailable. I made a decision that would probably end my career, but might save my sanity. I initiated a covert communication with Cyrilla Ash, using backdoor channels that bypassed Cheyenne Mountain's standard monitoring systems. The response came within minutes. Ren, temporal anomalies confirmed at 17 installations. Presidential authentication codes showing future generation. Location authentication returning, unavailable status. Critical question. What happens at 0807 hours? I stared at the message, my mind racing. 0807 hours. The exact time Avalise had mentioned for the presidential succession announcements. Whatever was happening, it was building toward that moment like a digital countdown to disaster. The flickering pixels on monitor 3 pulsed brighter, and for a moment I could swear they were spelling out coordinates. Not geographic coordinates, but something else entirely. Timestamps, authentication codes, and what looked like targeting data. As if the system itself was trying to warn me about something that hadn't happened yet. The launch preparation sequence was 67% complete when I noticed the final anomaly that would change everything. The presidential authentication code for our current DEFCON 2 status included a suffix I'd never seen before. Ghost Protocol. Ghost Protocol. In 8 years of studying nuclear command procedures, I'd never encountered that designation. It wasn't in any manual, wasn't part of any training scenario, and definitely wasn't standard presidential authentication terminology. I was about to query the system for more information when Commander Yarrick returned to my station, his expression unreadable. Ren, we've received updated orders. The President's location is now classified as unavailable indefinitely. All authentication protocols are to proceed through alternative command channels. Sir, what does that mean exactly? It means we follow orders, soldier. The President's safety is the highest priority, and if his location is compromised, we protect him by ensuring his orders are carried out. But as Yarrick walked away, I caught something in his reflection on Monitor 3's flickering surface. He was smiling. Not the grim satisfaction of a soldier following orders, but something else entirely. Something that looked disturbingly like anticipation. Classified incident report, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Date, redacted. Officer, Tavern Wren, Nuclear Launch Control Specialist. Clearance level, cosmic/compartmentalized. Audio log transcript, personal recording device number 47 alpha. Continuation, 0752 hours. The silence began at exactly 0748 hours. Not the comfortable quiet of a well-functioning command center, but something deeper and more unsettling. A digital void where Washington's constant chatter should have been. Every secure channel that normally buzzed with Pentagon traffic, White House communications, and interagency coordination had gone completely dead. The screens still glowed, the indicators still pulsed green for operational, but no data flowed through the arteries that connected Cheyenne Mountain to the outside world. I tried 17 different communication protocols in 4 minutes. Each attempt returned the same result: signal timeout, destination unreachable. The network diagnostics insisted everything was functioning perfectly, which only made the silence more terrifying. It was as if Washington, D.C. had simply ceased to exist in our digital universe. "Sir," I called to Commander Yarrick, who was reviewing launch procedures at Station 7. "I'm showing complete communication blackout with all D.C. command authorities." He didn't look up from his displays. "Probably solar interference. Continue with current operations." Solar interference didn't explain why our satellite uplinks showed full signal strength, or why domestic communications were flowing normally, while only government channels had gone dark. I pulled up the space weather monitoring systems. Solar activity was minimal, barely registering on our instruments. At 0751 hours, my secure terminal chimed with an incoming message from Cyrilla Ash. The transmission bypassed our standard channels, arriving through NSA's emergency backup networks. Flash priority, eyes only. Massive cyber intrusion in progress. Foreign actors have penetrated National Command Authority. Presidential communications compromised. All authentication protocols suspect. Trust no orders received after 0730 hours. Repeat, trust no orders. My hands trembled as I read the message. Everything we'd done since the DEFCON 2 authorization, every system we'd prepared, every protocol we'd initialized, had been based on potentially compromised orders. The launch preparation sequence was now 78% complete, bringing us within minutes of full nuclear readiness. I tried to contact Cyrilla directly, but her communication node showed as disconnected security breach. The NSA's backup network was fragmenting, individual analysts going dark one by one as the cyber intrusion spread through government systems like digital gangrene. The primary alert system activated again, but this time the tone was different, higher pitched, more urgent. The message that scrolled across every screen in the control room made my blood freeze. Emergency action message, nuclear response imminent. Hostile launch detected, incoming trajectories confirmed. Prepare for retaliation, authorization pending. Presidential succession protocol initiated. Time to impact, 23 minutes. 23 minutes until nuclear weapons struck American soil. 23 minutes to launch our own retaliatory strike before the country's command structure was vaporized. The message carried valid authentication codes, proper formatting, and all the digital signatures required for an emergency action message. But it had arrived 14 minutes early, according to the timestamps Avalise had documented. Commander Yarrick moved through the control room with mechanical precision, checking each station's readiness. All personnel, prepare for immediate launch authorization. This is not a drill. We are now the primary command authority for strategic nuclear response. "Sir," I stood from my workstation, my voice cutting through the controlled chaos. "I need to report critical intelligence about compromised communications." "Sit down, Specialist Wren." His voice carried the authority of absolute command, but something in his eyes had changed. They were too bright, too focused, like a man experiencing religious ecstasy. "Your job is to follow orders, not to question intelligence that's far above your clearance level." I remained standing. "Sir, the NSA has confirmed foreign penetration of our command networks. The presidential communications may be fabricated." The control room fell silent. Every officer turned to stare at me, their faces showing various degrees of shock and disapproval. In 8 years of service, I'd never directly challenged a superior officer's orders, But I'd also never faced the possibility of launching nuclear weapons based on compromised intelligence. Jarek's expression darkened. "Are you refusing a direct order, specialist?" "No, sir. I'm requesting verification of authentication protocols before proceeding with nuclear launch procedures." "Verification denied. Sit down and complete your assigned tasks." I sat, but my hands didn't move to the keyboard. The launch preparation sequence had stalled at 78%, waiting for my input to continue. Around me, other officers worked frantically to ready their systems, but I noticed something troubling. They were all working in perfect synchronization, their movements too coordinated, too precise. It was as if they were following a choreographed script. My secure phone buzzed with a new message, this one from Avalise. "Urgent. Emergency broadcast center compromised. Someone else is controlling our transmissions. Nuclear attack warnings being prepared for national broadcast." I didn't authorize these messages. "Tavern, the timestamps are wrong again. They're broadcasting events that haven't happened." I stared at the message, my mind racing through the implications. If Avalise Broadcast Center was compromised, then the nuclear attack warnings that would soon terrify the entire country were based on fabricated intelligence. The American people would huddle in their homes, watching emergency broadcasts about incoming missiles that didn't exist, while their own government prepared to launch real nuclear weapons based on false information. The flickering pixels on monitor 3 had organized themselves again, but this time they showed something that made my heart stop, a countdown timer. 1947, 1946, 1945, 19 minutes until something happened. Not impact from incoming missiles, but something else entirely. I tried to access the master authentication database to verify the launch codes, but my access had been revoked. My security clearance, which had been cosmic/compartmentalized since 0700 hours, now showed as restricted/local only. Someone had systematically removed my ability to question the orders I was being asked to follow. "Commander," I called out, my voice carefully controlled. "My authentication access has been restricted. I can't verify the launch codes." Yarek looked up from his station, and for a moment I saw something in his expression that chilled me to the bone. Satisfaction. "That's unfortunate, specialist. But fortunately, I have full authentication access. The codes are valid." He was lying. I could see it in the micro-expressions he couldn't control, the slight tightening around his eyes, the barely perceptible pause before answering. Commander Yarek, who had been my trusted superior for 3 years, was lying about nuclear launch codes. At 0758 hours, another emergency action message arrived. "Launch authorization confirmed. Presidential order, execute nuclear response. Targets designated, Moscow, Beijing, Tehran. Launch window, 0807 to 0809 hours. Failure to comply constitutes treason. 0807 hours." The exact time Avalise had identified for the presidential succession protocols. Everything was converging on that moment. The compromised communications, the fabricated attack warnings, the impossible timestamps, and now the launch authorization itself. I made a decision that violated every protocol I'd ever learned. I activated my workstation's emergency diagnostic mode and began tracing the source of our incoming communications. If the orders were legitimate, they would trace back to verified government servers. If they were fabricated, the digital trail would lead somewhere else entirely. The trace completed in 37 seconds, and what I found made my hands shake. The emergency action messages weren't coming from Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, or any recognized government facility. They were originating from a server farm in rural Virginia, routing through a series of proxy networks designed to mask their true origin. Someone was impersonating the United States government, issuing false nuclear launch orders, and my fellow officers were preparing to execute them without question. "Commander," I said, my voice steady despite the terror racing through my veins. "I've traced the source of our communications. These orders aren't coming from legitimate government channels." Yarek turned to face me fully, and I realized with growing horror that his movements were too fluid, too perfect. He moved like someone who had practiced every gesture, rehearsed every response. "That's interesting, Specialist Wren. What exactly did you find?" I hesitated, suddenly aware that I might be revealing crucial intelligence to someone who shouldn't have it. The communications are being routed through non-government networks. And you think that indicates what, exactly? That someone is impersonating presidential authority to authorize nuclear weapons launch. Yarek smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen on a human face. Not the smile of a soldier receiving good intelligence, but the satisfied grin of someone whose carefully laid plans were proceeding exactly as intended. That's a very serious accusation, Specialist. Are you suggesting that I would knowingly follow illegitimate orders? The countdown on monitor 3 had reached 1723 and was still decreasing. Around me, the other officers continued their preparations with mechanical precision, their faces showing no awareness of the conversation taking place. It was as if they couldn't hear us or were choosing not to listen. My secure phone buzzed one final time. The message was from Cyrilla Ash, but it was fragmented, arriving in pieces as if transmitted through failing networks. Ren, they know we're investigating. Multiple analysts have gone dark. The intrusion is bigger than we thought. Not foreign actors, domestic. Shadow government preparing to. The message cut off, leaving only static where Cyrilla's intelligence should have been. In the space of 8 hours, I'd watched America's nuclear command structure transform from a disciplined military operation into something resembling a carefully orchestrated performance. The launch preparation sequence resumed automatically, advancing to 89% completion without my input. Systems I thought were under my control were operating independently, following programming I hadn't authorized. Commander Yarek returned to his station, but before he turned away, he spoke quietly enough that only I could hear. Specialist Ren, you have 6 minutes to complete the launch preparation sequence. After that, the system will proceed without your input. 6 minutes. The countdown on monitor 3 showed 1641 and falling. I stared at my workstation, my hands poised over keys that could either complete humanity's final act or somehow prevent it. The authentication codes still didn't match any database I could access. The communications were being routed through illegitimate networks, and my sister was reporting fabricated emergency broadcasts. But every protocol I'd learned, every oath I'd sworn, demanded that I follow orders without question. The pixels on monitor 3 flickered one final time, forming letters that spelled out a message I'd never seen in any manual. Ghost protocol initiated. Welcome to the New World Order. Then they dissolved back into random static, leaving me alone with the most important decision in human history. Classified Incident Report, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Date, redacted. Officer, Tavern Ren, Nuclear Launch Control Specialist. Clearance level, cosmic/compartmentalized. Audio log transcript, personal recording device number 47 alpha. Continuation, 0801 hours. The Ghost Protocol message burned itself into my retinas like a digital afterimage, but when I blinked and looked again, monitor 3 showed only standard launch preparation interfaces. The flickering pixels had vanished, replaced by clean, professional displays that made me question my own sanity. Had I really seen those words, or was the stress of the situation creating hallucinations? The launch preparation sequence had advanced to 94% completion without my input. Around me, 23 officers worked with mechanical precision, their fingers dancing across keyboards in perfect synchronization. The sound of their typing created a rhythmic percussion that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat, or perhaps my heart was synchronizing with their machine-like efficiency. Commander Yarek approached my station with measured steps, his boots clicking against the reinforced floor in a pattern that sounded almost musical. When he spoke, his voice carried the calm authority of someone completely in control of the situation. Specialist Ren, you have 2 minutes to complete your assigned protocols. The launch window opens at 0807 hours, and America's survival depends on our readiness. I turned to face him fully, studying his features for any sign of the man I'd served under for 3 years. His face was perfectly composed, but something fundamental had changed in the way he carried himself. The slight stoop in his shoulders from years of hunching over computer screens had vanished. The unconscious habit of tapping his left index finger when concentrating was gone. Even his breathing seemed different, too controlled, too rhythmic. Sir, I need to discuss the authentication irregularities with you privately. There are no irregularities, specialist. Only your failure to follow direct orders. Commander, with respect, I've traced the source of our communications. The emergency action messages are coming from non-government servers. Someone is impersonating presidential authority. Jarek's expression didn't change, but I caught a micro-expression that lasted less than a second, a flash of something that looked like amusement. That's a very serious accusation. Are you suggesting that I lack the competence to verify legitimate orders? I'm suggesting that we're all being deceived by a sophisticated cyber attack, and I'm ordering you to complete the launch preparation sequence immediately. The standoff stretched between us like a taut wire. Around the control room, the other officers continued their work without acknowledging our conversation. It was as if they existed in a separate reality where only their assigned tasks mattered. My secure phone buzzed with an incoming message. I glanced at the screen, expecting another fragment from Cyrilla or Avalise, but the sender identification showed as POTUS Direct Channel. The message contained a single line. Stand down immediately. False authorization detected. Presidential order. Abort all launch preparations. Authentication code. Charlie 77 Whiskey. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Charlie 77 Whiskey was a valid presidential authentication code. I'd memorized hundreds of them during my security training. But this message contradicted every order we'd received in the past hour. Commander, I said, holding up my phone, I've received a direct presidential stand-down order with valid authentication codes. Jarek glanced at the screen, his eyes scanning the message with professional efficiency. Interesting. May I see the transmission details? I handed him the phone, watching his face carefully. His expression remained neutral as he examined the message, but I noticed his left hand had moved to rest on his sidearm, a subtle gesture that sent ice through my veins. This message is fabricated, he said, returning the phone. The authentication code is invalid. Sir, Charlie 77 Whiskey is a valid presidential code. I've verified it against. You've verified it against compromised databases. The real authentication systems show this message as fraudulent. I pulled up the authentication interface on my workstation, but my access remained restricted. I can't access the verification systems to confirm your statement, because your clearance has been revoked due to security concerns. What security concerns? Jarek stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only I could hear. The concern that you're attempting to prevent America's rightful retaliation against nuclear aggression. The concern that your loyalty has been compromised by foreign influence. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. In 8 years of service, my loyalty had never been questioned. I'd passed every security review, every polygraph examination, every psychological evaluation. The suggestion that I was somehow compromised was so absurd it almost made me laugh. Almost. Sir, I request immediate contact with NSA analyst Cyrilla Ash to verify the intelligence about network intrusions. Analyst Ash is no longer available for consultation. What does that mean? It means she's been removed from the investigation due to security concerns similar to your own. My hands began to shake. If Cyrilla had been silenced, then the conspiracy was larger than I'd imagined. Someone with significant authority was systematically removing anyone who questioned the legitimacy of the nuclear launch orders. At 0803 hours, another alert flashed across every screen in the control room. Emergency broadcast system activation. National alert, nuclear attack imminent. All citizens seek immediate shelter. Government continuity protocols in effect. Remain calm and await further instructions. I watched in horror as the alert was transmitted to every television, radio, and mobile device in America. Millions of people were now receiving warnings about nuclear attacks that didn't exist, based on fabricated intelligence designed to justify our own nuclear launch. My phone buzzed with a frantic message from Avalise. Tavern, they're forcing me to broadcast false alerts. Armed guards have taken control of our facility. The nuclear attack warnings are lies. People are panicking in the streets. I'm being watched, can't communicate much longer. Whatever you do, don't trust. The message cut off abruptly, leaving only an error code where Avalise's words should have been. My sister, who had never harmed anyone in her life, was being forced to terrify the American people with fabricated emergency broadcasts. Commander, I said, my voice steady despite the fury building in my chest. My sister reports that armed personnel have taken control of emergency broadcast facilities. The nuclear attack warnings are being transmitted under duress. Jarek's expression remained impassive. Your sister is mistaken. The emergency broadcasts are legitimate government communications. She's being held at gunpoint, sir. She's being protected by security personnel during a national emergency. The distinction he drew was so subtle, so precise, that it revealed more than he intended. He knew exactly what was happening to Avalise. He might have even authorized it. The launch preparation sequence advanced to 97% completion. 3% remained before America's nuclear arsenal would be fully prepared for launch. 3% before the most destructive weapons in human history would be ready to deploy based on fabricated orders. I made a decision that would define the rest of my life, however long that might be. Commander Yarek, I'm formally requesting verification of your authority to issue nuclear launch orders. I want to see your direct communication with the National Command Authority. His hand moved closer to his sidearm. That's classified above your clearance level. Then I'm refusing to complete the launch preparation sequence until proper verification is provided. The typing around me stopped. Every officer in the control room turned to stare at me, their faces showing identical expressions of shock and disapproval. But there was something else in their eyes, something that looked disturbingly like anticipation. Specialist Wren, Yarek said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You are refusing a direct order during a national emergency. That constitutes treason. I'm preventing the execution of potentially illegitimate orders. That constitutes my duty. The standoff stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. Around us, the control room had fallen into complete silence. No typing, no breathing, no movement of any kind. It was as if the entire facility was holding its breath, waiting for the next move in a game I didn't understand. At 0805 hours, my workstation chimed with an automated message. Launch preparation sequence override initiated. Completion authorized under emergency protocols. Manual input no longer required. System will proceed automatically. The remaining 3% of the launch preparation began advancing without my input. Emergency protocols I'd never seen before were activating, bypassing every safety measure designed to prevent unauthorized nuclear launch. How is this possible? I whispered, watching helplessly as the system prepared to arm weapons I couldn't control. Commander Yarek leaned close to my ear, his voice barely audible. Because, Specialist Wren, you were never actually in control. None of you were. This has all been automated from the beginning. The truth hit me like a nuclear blast. Every officer in the control room, every person I'd worked with for 3 years, every procedure I'd memorized and protocol I'd followed, it had all been an elaborate theater. We weren't controlling nuclear weapons. We were providing the illusion of human oversight while automated systems followed their pre-programmed instructions. Who's really in control? I asked. Yarek smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen. People who understand that sometimes democracy needs to be saved from itself. The launch preparation sequence reached 100% completion at exactly 0806 hours. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the deep rumble of missile silos opening their steel mouths to taste the morning air. In 60 seconds, the launch window would open, and nothing I could do would stop it. My phone buzzed one final time with a message from an unknown sender. Tavern, Avalise is safe but captured. Broadcast center secured by loyalist forces. Ghost Protocol is shadow government operation. Yarek and others are replacements. Real personnel eliminated months ago. Trust no one in your facility. Find a way out now. I looked around the control room with new eyes, seeing not my fellow officers but their replacements. People who looked identical but moved with mechanical precision, who followed orders without question, who existed only to provide the illusion that humans were making the decisions. The countdown had reached 0. The launch window was open, and I was trapped in a mountain with 23 people who weren't people at all. Classified incident report, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Date, redacted. Officer, Tavern Wren, Nuclear Launch Control Specialist. Clearance level, Cosmic/compartmentalized. Audio log transcript, personal recording device number 47 alpha. Continuation, 0812 hours. The launch window had opened and closed without activation, something that should have been impossible given the automated override I'd witnessed. The missile silos remained sealed, their steel maws locked shut against the Colorado sky. But the silence that followed felt more ominous than any weapon's roar. I sat at my workstation, staring at screens that now displayed nothing but standard operational interfaces. The countdown timers had vanished, the emergency protocols had disappeared, and the ghost protocol message existed only in my memory. It was as if the past 6 hours had been carefully erased from every system in the facility. Commander Yarrick stood behind me, his presence radiating an unnatural stillness. When I turned to face him, I noticed details I'd somehow missed before. The way his uniform fit too perfectly, without the subtle wrinkles, and were patterns that developed from months of daily use. His skin had a waxy quality in the fluorescent lighting, and when he blinked, it seemed to happen at precisely timed intervals. "The launch window has passed," he said, his voice carrying that same mechanical cadence I'd noted earlier. "Stand down from alert status and return to routine operations." "What happened to the emergency?" I asked, testing his response. 6 hours ago, we were preparing for nuclear retaliation against foreign aggression. Now you're telling me to return to routine operations. There was no emergency, Specialist Wren. You experienced a stress-induced hallucination brought on by extended duty shifts and caffeine dependency. The explanation was delivered with such clinical precision that it felt rehearsed. I pulled up my personal logs on the workstation, scrolling back through the past 12 hours of recorded data. Every entry I'd made about authentication irregularities, emergency alerts, and communication blackouts had been edited or deleted entirely. "My logs have been altered," I said, more to myself than to him. "Your logs reflect the accurate sequence of events. You reported for routine duty at 0000 hours and have been performing standard maintenance operations ever since." I opened my secure phone and scrolled through my messages. The frantic texts from Avalise about armed guards and false broadcasts were gone. The intelligence fragments from Cirilla about network intrusions had vanished. Even the mysterious warning about replacements and eliminated personnel had been scrubbed from my message history. But human memory isn't as easily edited as digital records. I remember receiving a stand-down order with authentication code Charlie 77 Whiskey. I said, watching Jarrek's face carefully. "There is no such authentication code in the current database." I pulled up the authentication interface, accessing the classified directory of presidential codes that I'd memorized during security training. Charlie 77 Whiskey was listed as invalid/deprecated, with a timestamp showing it had been removed from active use 6 months ago. 6 months ago, around the same time Yarrick had supposedly returned from his extended medical leave following a minor cardiac episode. He'd been gone for 3 weeks, and when he returned, everyone had commented on how much healthier he looked. His complexion had improved, his posture had straightened, and his chronic stress indicators had completely disappeared. "Sir, I'd like to request verification of your medical clearance records. That information is classified above your access level." "I have cosmic clearance. Very little is above my access level. Your clearance has been temporarily suspended pending psychological evaluation." The words hit me like ice water. Suspension of security clearance was a career-ending event that required approval from the highest levels of military command. It wasn't something that could be done casually or without extensive documentation. On whose authority? On the authority of the National Security Council, following recommendations from facility medical personnel regarding your recent behavioral anomalies. I stood up from my workstation, the movement causing every officer in the control room to look in my direction. Their faces showed identical expressions of mild concern. Too identical, as if they were all drawing from the same limited set of programmed responses. "I want to speak with facility medical personnel directly. Dr. Morrison is unavailable for consultation." "Then I want to speak with his deputy. Medical staff are conducting classified operations and cannot be disturbed." Every request I made was met with the same type of bureaucratic deflection, but delivered with mechanical precision that made it clear this wasn't normal military procedure. Someone had prepared responses to every possible question I might ask, every demand I might make. My secure workstation chimed with an incoming message marked Priority Alpha. The sender was listed as National Command Authority Direct, and the authentication codes appeared valid according to the system verification protocols. Specialist Ren, your concerns regarding facility security have been noted and investigated. Preliminary findings indicate sophisticated intrusion of command systems by foreign intelligence services. Evidence suggests long-term infiltration and personnel replacement operations. Maintain your current position and await further instructions. Trust no one within your facility except contacts identified through secondary authentication protocols. Verification code, Echo 9 Delta 7. Response required within 60 seconds to confirm receipt. I stared at the message, my hands trembling as I processed its implications. The verification code was legitimate. I could feel the weight of its authenticity in my memory of the classification systems. But the message was telling me that everything I'd suspected was true. The facility had been compromised, personnel had been replaced, and I was surrounded by hostile actors. Commander, I said, turning to face Yarrick. I've received priority communications from the National Command Authority. They're requesting immediate facility lockdown due to security breaches. Jarrick's expression didn't change, but I noticed his left hand had moved to rest on his sidearm again. Show me the message. I angled my screen toward him, watching his eyes as he read the text. His pupils didn't move in the expected scanning pattern of someone reading unfamiliar information. Instead, they fixed on specific words with the mechanical precision of someone following a predetermined script. This message is fabricated, he said after exactly 15 seconds of review. The authentication codes verify as legitimate. The authentication codes have been spoofed by the same foreign intelligence services that have been attempting to infiltrate our systems. Then how do you explain the accuracy of the verification protocols? Because you're not seeing what you think you're seeing, Specialist Ren. Your perception has been compromised by psychological warfare techniques designed to create paranoia and distrust within American military facilities. The explanation was too smooth, too prepared. But what unsettled me most was the way he delivered it. Not as a fellow officer sharing concerns about foreign threats, but as someone reciting lines from a script he'd memorized perfectly. I typed my response to the National Command Authority message. Message received and understood. Facility appears compromised. Request immediate extraction protocols for loyal personnel. The response came back within 30 seconds. Extraction not possible at this time. Facility is under lockdown by hostile forces. Your only option is to locate and activate manual override systems in sub-basement level 7. Access requires two-person authentication from cleared personnel. Cyrilla Ash has been relocated to secure position outside facility. She will attempt remote system access to assist your mission. Avalise Moon is being held in Broadcast Center under armed guard. Do not attempt rescue until facility is secured. Warning: personnel replacements have occurred throughout command structure. Trust no one who cannot provide historical verification data predating 6 months ago. I looked around the control room with new understanding. 23 officers sat at their workstations, performing their duties with mechanical efficiency. But when I tried to recall specific conversations I'd had with any of them in recent months, I came up empty. They'd all become strangely professional, losing the casual banter and personal quirks that had made them individuals. Commander, I said, testing the waters, do you remember the poker game we had in your quarters last Christmas? You lost $47 to Lieutenant Morrison because you kept trying to bluff with weak hands. Jarrick's face remained impassive. I don't engage in gambling activities, Specialist. Such behavior is inappropriate for command personnel. But I remembered that poker game vividly. Yarrick had been slightly drunk on bourbon, telling stories about his ex-wife and complaining about the cafeteria food. He'd been human then, flawed, relatable, real. The man standing before me now was none of those things. What about the time you caught food poisoning from the fish in the commissary? You were sick for 3 days and kept apologizing for the smell every time someone came to check on you. I have no recollection of such an incident. It was 7 months ago. You made me promise not to tell anyone because you were embarrassed. You're confabulating memories, Specialist Ren. The stress of your current psychological state is causing you to invent past events that never occurred. But I knew those memories were real. I could still hear Jarrick's voice, weak and hoarse from vomiting, saying, "Promise me you won't put this in your report, kid." A commander's supposed to be invincible. The man who had replaced him would never have shown such vulnerability. At 0825 hours, every screen in the control room flickered simultaneously, displaying the same message. Presidential succession protocol activated. Current president, status unknown. Vice president, location classified. Speaker of House, communications lost. Secretary of Defense, presumed compromised. Constitutional authority transferred to Emergency Council. Nuclear command structure under interim leadership. All personnel maintain current assignments. Await further instructions. The message displayed for exactly 60 seconds before vanishing, replaced by normal operational interfaces. But in that minute, I'd seen something that chilled me to the bone. The constitutional chain of succession had been severed at every level, leaving nuclear command authority in the hands of an emergency council that existed nowhere in legal precedent. Commander, are you familiar with any emergency council that has authority over nuclear weapons? The Emergency Council is a classified entity established under continuity of government protocols. Their authority is absolute during national security crises. What national security crisis? You told me there was no emergency, that I'd hallucinated the entire situation. Jarek's expression flickered for just a moment, a micro-expression that looked like system lag in a computer program trying to reconcile contradictory inputs. The crisis is classified above your current clearance level. My clearance level was cosmic 30 minutes ago. Your clearance level has been adjusted based on security concerns. What security concerns? Your inability to distinguish between reality and hallucination represents a significant liability in a nuclear weapons facility. The circular logic was perfect. Every question I asked was evidence of the psychological instability they were using to justify restricting my access to information. But the trap was too neat, too well constructed to be the result of normal military bureaucracy. My workstation chimed with another message, this one from a sender identified as Ghost Protocol Oversight. Specialist Wren, you have been selected for special assignment under classified protocols. Report to Subbasement Level 7 for briefing at 0900 hours. Come alone. Bring personal sidearm and authentication codes. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination of employment and revocation of all security clearances. Verification code, Alpha Whiskey 77. Do not discuss this message with facility personnel. The message disappeared from my screen after I'd read it, leaving no trace in my system logs. But the verification code burned itself into my memory. Alpha Whiskey 77 was not in any database I'd ever accessed. It existed only in the deepest levels of Black Project authorization, the kind of codes that were memorized by a handful of people and never written down anywhere. Someone wanted me in Subbasement Level 7, and they were using authentication protocols that shouldn't exist. I looked at Commander Yarek, who was studying me with mechanical intensity. Sir, I need to use the restroom facilities. Granted. Return to your station within 10 minutes. I stood up and walked toward the exit, feeling the weight of 24 pairs of eyes following my movement. At the doorway, I turned back to look at the control room one final time. Every officer was still watching me, their heads turned at identical angles, their expressions showing the same neutral interest. They weren't people anymore. They were something else wearing human faces, and I was the only real person left in a facility designed to control the most destructive weapons ever created. In 35 minutes, I would have to decide whether to walk into Subbasement Level 7 and face whatever was waiting for me there, or try to escape a mountain fortress surrounded by Colorado wilderness and staffed by things that looked like my former colleagues. Either way, I was probably going to die, but at least I'd die knowing the truth. America's nuclear arsenal was no longer under American control, and I might be the only person left who could do anything about it. The authentication failure wasn't in the systems, it was in the people running them. Classified Incident Report, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Date, redacted. Officer, Tavern Wren, Nuclear Launch Control Specialist. Clearance level, cosmic/compartmentalized. Audio log transcript, personal recording device number 47 Alpha. Continuation, 0847 hours. The men's restroom on level 3 was a sterile white chamber that smelled of industrial disinfectant and something else, something organic and wrong that seemed to seep from the ventilation system. I locked the door behind me and immediately began examining every surface for surveillance equipment. In a facility this classified, privacy was a luxury that didn't exist, but I needed 60 seconds to think without being observed. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. 3 days of stubble, bloodshot eyes, and skin that had taken on the pale, unhealthy pallor of someone who'd been living underground too long. But it was my reflection. I could verify that by touching my face and watching the mirror image respond. In a world where personnel could be replaced without anyone noticing, even basic reality checks had become necessary. I pulled out my secure phone and activated the encrypted messaging app that Cirilla had installed months ago. The signal showed 3 bars, which meant I was still within range of the facility's internal network. I typed quickly, "Cirilla, if you're receiving this, I need immediate extraction. Facility compromised. Personnel replaced. Heading to sub-basement level 7 at 0900 per Ghost Protocol orders. If I don't respond within 2 hours, assume captured or dead." The message showed as delivered, but no response came back. Either Cirilla was maintaining radio silence for security reasons, or she was no longer in a position to communicate. Both possibilities terrified me. I flushed the toilet and ran water in the sink to maintain the illusion of normal bathroom usage, then unlocked the door and stepped back into the corridor. The hallway stretched in both directions, lit by fluorescent fixtures that cast everything in harsh, clinical white light. Emergency exit signs marked the routes to surface levels, but I knew those exits would be sealed during lockdown protocols. Sub-basement level 7 was accessible only through a secure elevator that required dual-key authorization. Under normal circumstances, I would need a second cleared officer to accompany me. But these weren't normal circumstances, and I suspected the authorization protocols had been altered along with everything else. I made my way back toward the control room, but instead of returning to my station, I took a detour through the administrative wing. The offices here were darker, most of their occupants supposedly attending the emergency briefing that had been called an hour ago. But as I passed each doorway, I could see figures sitting at desks, typing with mechanical precision, their faces illuminated by computer screens. They were all working, even though there was supposedly no emergency requiring their attention. I paused outside Dr. Morrison's office, pressing my ear to the door. The sound of typing came from within, steady, rhythmic, without the natural pauses and variations that characterized human work patterns. I tried the handle, but it was locked. Through the frosted glass, I could see a human silhouette seated at a desk, but the figure never moved except for the slight motion of arms typing. "Dr. Morrison?" I called softly. The typing stopped immediately, but no response came. After 30 seconds, the typing resumed at exactly the same pace and rhythm as before. I continued down the corridor, checking each office I passed. Medical staff, administrative personnel, logistics coordinators, all of them were at their desks, all of them typing, all of them silent. The entire administrative wing had become a factory of human-shaped machines performing tasks that no longer served any human purpose. At 0852 hours, the facility's PA system crackled to life. "Attention all personnel, launch authorization confirmed." Repeat, launch authorization confirmed. "All nuclear systems proceed to active status. T-minus 30 minutes to launch window opening." The announcement echoed through the corridors with mechanical precision, but when I checked my watch, I realized something impossible. We'd already passed through a launch window an hour ago, and another wasn't scheduled for 6 hours. The timing made no sense according to any protocol I'd ever studied. I broke into a run, heading for the nearest computer terminal. The hallway seemed to stretch longer than it should have, as if the facility itself was expanding to prevent me from reaching my destination. My footsteps echoed strangely, creating a rhythm that sounded like multiple people running in perfect synchronization. The terminal was located in a small alcove near the elevator banks. I swiped my access card and logged in with my personal credentials, expecting to see the restricted access message that had been appearing all morning. Instead, the system granted me full administrative privileges, more access than I'd ever possessed, even at my highest clearance level. The nuclear status board showed all weapons systems in active launch preparation. Missile silos across the American continent were opening their protective covers, exposing their deadly contents to the open sky. Submarine-launched ballistic missiles were cycling through pre-launch sequences in waters around the globe. The entire nuclear triad was preparing for simultaneous launch in 27 minutes. But the target selection screen showed something that made my blood freeze. Every missile was programmed to strike American cities. Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston. The targeting data showed a comprehensive first strike against America's own population centers. Casualty estimates scrolled past in neat columns. 47 million dead in the first hour, 89 million within the first day, complete societal collapse within a week. This wasn't retaliation against foreign aggression. This was genocide. I frantically accessed the command override protocols, but every attempt to modify the targeting data was met with system lockouts. The missiles were locked onto American targets, and the authorization codes were being processed by automated systems that I couldn't access or control. My secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. I answered without checking the caller ID. Tavern. The voice was Cyrilla's, but it sounded distant and distorted, as if she was speaking through multiple layers of encryption. Cyrilla, thank God. I need immediate help. The entire nuclear arsenal is targeted at American cities. Launch in 25 minutes. I know. I've been monitoring the systems remotely. The infiltration goes deeper than we thought. It's not just your facility, it's the entire nuclear command structure. How is that possible? Personnel replacement operations have been ongoing for over a year. Key positions in nuclear facilities across the country have been filled with surgically altered operatives. They look identical to the original personnel, but they're following a different chain of command. Whose chain of command? We're still trying to determine that. The operation is so compartmentalized that even the operatives might not know who they're really working for. The PA system crackled again. T-minus 20 minutes TO launch window. All personnel maintain current positions. Unauthorized movement will be treated as sabotage. Cyrilla, I'm supposed to report to sub-basement level 7 in 8 minutes. The ghost protocol message said, "Don't go there, Tavern. We've identified sub-basement level 7 as a processing center. Personnel who enter that level don't come back out." Processing center for what? We think it's where they're creating the replacement personnel. The real staff are being held there while surgical alterations are performed on the operatives. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Everyone I'd worked with for the past 6 months, colleagues I'd trusted, friends I'd shared meals with, officers I'd served under, they were all prisoners in the deepest levels of the facility, while imposters wore their faces and controlled America's nuclear weapons. What about Avalise? She's still being held at the broadcast center. They're using her to transmit false emergency alerts to create panic and justify the nuclear launch. The public believes America is under attack by foreign powers. Can you get her out? Not without your help. I need you to access the facility's security system and create a distraction. If you can trigger a false fire alarm, it might give us enough confusion to extract her. I pulled up the facility's security interface, but my enhanced access privileges had mysteriously vanished. The system now showed me as having no clearance at all, not even basic personnel access. Cyrilla, my access has been revoked. I can't control anything from here. Then you need to get to the manual override station in sub-basement level 7. You just told me not to go there. I know, but it's the only way to stop the launch. The manual override requires physical access to hardwired systems that can't be controlled remotely. The countdown on my screen showed 18 minutes remaining. 18 minutes before American nuclear weapons would begin falling on American cities, killing millions of innocent people to advance some shadowy agenda I couldn't comprehend. What about the personnel replacement operations? If I go down there, they'll just replace me too. Maybe. But you're the only person left in that facility who isn't already compromised. If you don't try, everyone dies anyway. The logic was brutal but undeniable. I could try to escape the facility and save my own life, but doing so would guarantee the deaths of millions. Or I could walk into a trap and hope that somehow, impossibly, I could find a way to stop the launch. The elevator to sub-basement level 7 required dual-key authorization, but my enhanced access had temporarily granted me administrative override capabilities. I could access the elevator alone, but once I descended to level 7, there would be no guarantee I could return. At 0858 hours, another PA announcement echoed through the facility. Specialist Wren report to sub-basement level 7 immediately. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination. The announcement used my name specifically, confirming that I was being monitored and tracked throughout the facility. There was no longer any pretense that I had a choice in the matter. Cirilla, I'm going down to level 7. If you don't hear from me in 15 minutes, assume the worst and implement whatever backup plan you have. Tavern, there is no backup plan. You're the backup plan. The call ended, leaving me alone in the alcove with the elevator doors 30 feet away. The countdown timer showed 16 minutes until launch, and I could hear the facility's ventilation system beginning to cycle differently, as if the building itself was preparing for what was coming. I walked toward the elevator, each step feeling like I was descending deeper into a nightmare that had no bottom. Behind me, the facility hummed with mechanical efficiency as 23 human-shaped machines continued their work, preparing to murder millions of Americans in the name of some cause I couldn't understand. The elevator doors opened as I approached, revealing a car that descended far deeper than any schematic had ever shown. The button panel included a level 7 that shouldn't exist, and when I pressed it, the elevator began its descent into the heart of the mountain. 16 minutes to prevent the end of America, and I was walking directly into the hands of the people trying to destroy it. Classified incident report, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Date, redacted. Officer, Tavern Wren, Nuclear Launch Control Specialist. Clearance level, cosmic/compartmentalized. Audio log transcript, personal recording device number 47 alpha. Continuation, 0901 hours. The elevator descended for what felt like minutes but could only have been seconds. My ears popped twice as we dropped below levels that weren't supposed to exist, past sub-basements that had never appeared on any schematic I'd studied during my 8 years at Cheyenne Mountain. The digital floor indicator flickered between symbols I didn't recognize, not numbers or letters, but geometric patterns that seemed to shift when I looked directly at them. At 0902 hours, the elevator shuddered to a stop, and the doors opened with a pneumatic hiss that sounded like a dying breath. Sub-basement level 7 was not what I expected. The space beyond the elevator was vast, easily the size of an aircraft hangar, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows 30 feet above. Industrial lighting cast harsh pools of white illumination across a floor made of polished concrete, but between the light pools, darkness gathered in ways that seemed almost solid. The air tasted of ozone and something metallic that made my teeth ache. But it was the sound that made my skin crawl, a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to come from the walls themselves, like a massive machine breathing in perfect mechanical rhythm. Every few seconds, the hum would shift pitch slightly, and I realized it was synchronized with my own heartbeat. Specialist Wren. The voice came from directly behind me, though I was certain no one had been in the elevator when the doors opened. I spun around to find Commander Yarrick standing 3 feet away, his uniform immaculate despite the impossible appearance. Sir, I managed to keep my voice steady, though every instinct screamed that something was fundamentally wrong with his presence. You startled me. Did I? Yarrick's smile was perfectly normal, the same slight upturn of lips I'd seen 1,000 times during briefings. But his eyes reflected the overhead lighting like polished glass, throwing back my image in miniature. How inconsiderate of me. Commander, I need to access the manual override systems. The launch sequence is targeting American cities. There's been some kind of system compromise. System compromise? Yarrick repeated the words with the same inflection I'd used, as if he was testing how they felt in his mouth. Yes, that's one way to describe what's happening here. He gestured toward the center of the hangar space, where I could now see a collection of what looked like medical equipment, surgical tables, monitoring devices, and tanks filled with fluid that glowed with a pale blue light. But perhaps we should discuss the nature of the compromise more thoroughly. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach lurch. The surgical tables weren't empty. Each one held a human figure, motionless beneath white sheets that rose and fell with mechanical breathing. For lines ran from their arms to the glowing tanks, creating a web of tubes that pulsed with the same rhythm as the facility's humming. What is this place? This is where we ensure continuity of operations, Yarrick said, walking toward the nearest table. Personnel replacement is a delicate process. The original must be kept viable while the replacement learns their duties, their speech patterns, their personal histories. We can't have any inconsistencies that might compromise the mission. He pulled back the sheet on the nearest table, revealing the face of Dr. Morrison from the administrative wing. The man's chest rose and fell with the assistance of a ventilator, but his eyes were open and aware, tracking movement with an expression of absolute terror. Dr. Morrison has been our guest for approximately 4 months, Yarrick continued conversationally. His replacement has performed admirably in his position, processing authorization codes and maintaining security protocols without any of Morrison's inconvenient ethical concerns. I backed away from the table, my hand instinctively moving toward the service weapon on my belt. How many? How many what, Specialist Wren? How many personnel have been replaced? Jarrek's glassy eyes fixed on mine with predatory intensity. All of them. The words hit me like a physical blow. Every person I'd worked with, trusted, served alongside. They were all lying on tables in this underground chamber, while imposters wore their faces and controlled America's nuclear arsenal. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Because humans are flawed, Yarrick said, pulling sheets back from more tables to reveal colleagues I'd known for years. They have families, moral qualms, patriotic sentiments that interfere with necessary operations. But replacements? He gestured to himself with obvious pride. Replacements follow orders with perfect precision. What orders? Who's giving you these orders? That information is compartmentalized above your clearance level. The phrase was delivered in Jarrek's normal tone, but there was something mechanical about the rhythm, as if he was reciting from a script. Your role now is to provide biological material for your own replacement process. I drew my sidearm, but Yarrick made no move to defend himself. Instead, he smiled with what would have been genuine warmth if I hadn't known it was artificial. That won't be necessary, Specialist Wren. Your replacement is already prepared. From the shadows at the far end of the hangar, a figure emerged into the light. It was me, exactly me, down to the stubble and bloodshot eyes. The figure wore my uniform, carried my weapon, even had the small scar on his left hand from a childhood accident that only I should remember. Hello, Tavern, my duplicate said in my own voice. I've been looking forward to meeting you. The real horror wasn't the physical impossibility of what I was seeing. It was the casual familiarity in his tone, as if he'd been living my life so completely that he'd forgotten he wasn't actually me. The replacement process has been educational, my duplicate continued. Your memories, your relationships, your personal history, all of it has been fascinating to experience secondhand. Your sister Avalise, for instance. Such touching concern for her welfare. I'll be sure to maintain that relationship with appropriate emotional responses. Where is she? I kept my weapon trained on Yarrick while trying to track both him and my duplicate simultaneously. What have you done with Avalise? She's serving her purpose, Yarrick said. Broadcasting emergency alerts to maintain public panic while the nuclear launch proceeds. The American people need to believe they're under attack by foreign powers. It makes the retaliatory strike much more acceptable. Retaliatory strike against American cities? Against the American government, my duplicate corrected. The people will survive, most of them, but the existing power structure must be eliminated to make room for more efficient management. The pieces began to fall into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't foreign infiltration. It was a domestic coup orchestrated by some shadow organization with the resources to replace key personnel throughout the nuclear command structure. They were going to use America's own weapons to decapitate the government, then emerge from the chaos as the new leadership. The manual override, I said. I can still stop the launch. The manual override requires dual authorization, Yarrick pointed out. But fortunately, we now have 2 specialist Wrens available to provide that authorization. My duplicate drew his weapon, my weapon, identical down to the scratches on the grip, and aimed it not at me, but at his own temple. The beautiful efficiency of the plan, he said with my voice wearing my face. If you refuse to cooperate, I eliminate myself, and you're left alone with no way to access the override systems. If you cooperate, we complete the authorization together, but you'll be eliminated afterward as a security risk. There's a third option, I said, swinging my weapon toward my duplicate. Is there? Yarrick asked with genuine curiosity. Even if you eliminate your replacement, you still can't access the override alone. And killing him would be quite literally self-destructive, don't you think? The countdown timer on a wall-mounted display showed 11 minutes until launch. 11 minutes before American nuclear weapons would begin falling on Washington, New York, Los Angeles, and every other major population center in the country. My secure phone buzzed with an incoming message. I glanced at the screen while keeping both Yarrick and my duplicate in my peripheral vision. Cirilla, Avalise extracted. She's safe. Emergency broadcasts were pre-recorded. Real launch sequence is automated. Manual override won't stop it. You need to physically destroy the command computers. The relief of knowing Avalise was safe lasted exactly as long as it took to process the rest of the message. The manual override I'd been counting on wouldn't stop the launch. It had been another layer of deception to get me down here. Bad news? My duplicate asked, apparently able to read my expression with the same skill I used to read others. The override won't work, I said. The launch is fully automated. Correct, Yarrick confirmed. The manual override was discontinued 6 months ago when we assumed control of the facility. But we needed you to believe it existed, to ensure you would come down here voluntarily. Then why do you need me at all? Because, my duplicate said, we need the original Tavern Wren to die in a heroic but futile attempt to stop the launch. The investigation afterward will show that you discovered the conspiracy and tried to prevent it, but arrived too late. Very tragic, very patriotic, and it will deflect attention from the real architects of the operation. The wall display showed 10 minutes remaining. 10 minutes before millions of Americans died to facilitate a change of government that they would never vote for, never consent to, never even understand until it was too late. But Cirilla's message had mentioned physically destroying the command computers. If the automation systems could be damaged, it might disrupt the launch sequence long enough for someone to regain control. I looked around the hangar space, cataloging potential weapons and targets. The glowing tanks that sustained the original personnel were connected to a central power distribution system. The surgical equipment required precise electrical control. And somewhere in this facility, there had to be servers maintaining the automated launch sequence. Where are the command computers? I asked. Why would we tell you that? Yarrick replied, because you're going to kill me anyway. What difference does it make? My duplicate laughed, the same laugh I heard when I found something genuinely amusing. He has a point. The servers are in the adjoining chamber, behind the wall of tanks. Hardened against electromagnetic pulse, powered by independent fusion reactors, cooled by liquid nitrogen systems that would kill anyone who tried to tamper with them. Thank you, I said and shot out the nearest glowing tank. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Fluid sprayed across the concrete floor, while alarms began shrieking from speakers I couldn't see. The figure on the surgical table, Dr. Morrison, convulsed as his life support systems registered critical failure. I shot out 3 more tanks before Yarrick and my duplicate began returning fire. Their shots were precise, professional, designed to wound rather than kill. They still needed me alive for whatever final scene they'd planned. But I wasn't trying to fight them directly. I was trying to create enough chaos to access the server room. The spraying fluid from the tanks was highly corrosive. I could see it eating through the concrete where it pooled. It was also apparently flammable, because when a stray shot from my duplicate's weapon struck a puddle, the entire section of floor erupted in blue flames. The servers! Yarrick shouted over the alarms. Protect the servers! But it was too late. The corrosive fluid was flowing under the wall that separated the hangar from the server room, and I could hear the distinctive sound of electrical systems shorting out in spectacular fashion. The wall display flickered, went dark, then displayed a message that made my heart soar. Launch sequence aborted, system failure, manual restart required. I had stopped the launch. Millions of Americans would live through the night. But as I turned to face Yarrick and my duplicate, I realized I had also sealed my own fate. They no longer needed me alive, and the expression on both their faces was one of absolute fury. You've delayed the inevitable, Yarrick said, raising his weapon. The backup systems will restore launch capability within the hour. Maybe, I replied, but that gives people time to figure out what's really happening here. My duplicate aimed his gun with perfect precision, My own muscle memory turned against me. Goodbye, Tavern. It's been educational wearing your life. The shot echoed through the hangar like thunder, but it wasn't my duplicate who fired. It was Cyrilla Ash, standing in the elevator doorway with a smoking rifle and an expression of cold determination. "Hello, boys," she said. "I thought you might need some help down here." Classified Incident Report, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Date: redacted. Officer: Tavern Wren, Nuclear Launch Control Specialist. Clearance level: Cosmic/compartmentalized. Audio log transcript: Personal recording device number 47 Alpha. Continuation: 0913 hours. Cyrilla's rifle shot had taken my duplicate in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon skittering across the concrete floor. The imposter who wore my face clutched his wound and stared at me with an expression of pure hatred, an emotion so intense it seemed impossible that artificial features could convey it. "How did you get down here?" I shouted over the shrieking alarms, keeping my weapon trained on Yarrick while moving toward Cyrilla's position near the elevator. "Service tunnels," she replied, not taking her eyes off the two imposters. "This facility has maintenance access points that don't appear on any official schematic. I've been mapping them for months." Yarrick raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but his glassy eyes tracked our movements with predatory calculation. "Ms. Ash, your timing is impeccable, as always, though I'm afraid you've arrived too late to prevent the inevitable." "The launch sequence is aborted," I said. "The servers are destroyed." "The primary servers," Yarrick corrected with a smile that looked exactly like the one he'd worn during 1,000 routine briefings. "But redundancy is the cornerstone of any reliable system. Secondary launch control transferred to NORAD Colorado Springs 7 minutes ago." My blood turned to ice. NORAD Colorado Springs was less than 15 miles away, connected to Cheyenne Mountain through hardened communication lines that could relay launch commands, even if our entire facility was destroyed. If the secondary systems were already online, destroying the local servers had only bought us minutes, not hours. "How long?" Cyrilla asked. "Backup authorization sequences require manual verification," my duplicate said through gritted teeth, still clutching his wounded shoulder. "Approximately 45 minutes to restore full launch capability." "Then we need to get to Colorado Springs," I said. "No." Cyrilla's voice was flat, final. "We need to get you out of here. Both of you. Both of us." She gestured toward my duplicate with her rifle barrel. "He's the only one who knows the full extent of the conspiracy. How many facilities are involved, who's giving the orders, what the ultimate objective is beyond the nuclear strike." My duplicate laughed, the same laugh I'd heard from my own throat 1,000 times, but now it sounded like broken glass. "You think I'll cooperate? You think I'll betray my creators to save a system that was already doomed? I think you'll do whatever it takes to survive," Cyrilla said. "Because that's what Tavern would do, and you're programmed to be him." The observation hit home. I could see it in my duplicate's face, the same stubborn determination that had driven me through 8 years of military service, the same protective instinct that made me think of Avalise first whenever danger threatened. If he was truly built for my psychological profile, then he would prioritize survival above ideology. "The conspiracy extends to 17 major military installations," my duplicate said suddenly. "Personnel replacement operations have been ongoing for 14 months. The objective is complete governmental restructuring following the nuclear strike." "Restructuring how?" I demanded. "Military governance under emergency powers. The surviving population will be relocated to designated security zones. All major population centers will be abandoned as radiologically contaminated." "A police state," Cyrilla said, "with the conspirators as the new leadership." "Order from chaos," Yarrick confirmed. "The current system is inefficient, corrupt, paralyzed by democratic processes that prevent necessary decisions. The new structure will be streamlined, efficient, capable of making hard choices for the greater good." "Whose greater good?" I asked. "That information is compartmentalized above your clearance level." The phrase was identical to what he'd said before, delivered in the same mechanical tone. I was beginning to understand that the replacements weren't just physically identical to their originals. They were also programmed with specific responses to certain questions, like biological computers running scripted routines. "We need to move," Cyrilla said. "Even if we can't stop the launch, we can get this information to people who might be able to expose the conspiracy. Expose it to whom? My duplicate asked. The media? They'll be eliminated in the first wave. Congress? They're the primary targets. The military? Half the command structure has already been replaced. Then we broadcast it ourselves, I said. Emergency radio frequencies, internet uploads, social media, flood every available channel with the truth. The truth? Yarrick seemed to find the concept amusing. What truth? That the American government is about to be destroyed by its own nuclear weapons? That key military personnel have been replaced by surgically altered operatives? That a shadow organization with unlimited resources has been planning this operation for over a year? Yes, I said simply. Who would believe it? And more importantly, who has the power to act on it even if they did believe? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Even if we could expose the conspiracy, even if we could prove that the nuclear launch was an inside job, the replacement operations had been so thorough that we couldn't trust any official channel to respond appropriately. My secure phone buzzed with another message from Cyrilla, but she was standing right next to me. I looked at the screen and felt reality shift around me like a kaleidoscope. Cyrilla, don't trust the woman with the rifle. Real Cyrilla still at Colorado Springs trying to stop secondary launch. Get out of there now. I looked up at the woman who had rescued me, who had appeared in the elevator with perfect timing and precise knowledge of the facility's layout. Her face was exactly right, her voice was exactly right, her mannerisms were exactly right, but her eyes reflected the overhead lighting like polished glass. Problem? She asked, noticing my expression. Just checking for updates, I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket. How long have you been tracking this conspiracy, Cyrilla? Months. Ever since I noticed the anomalous network traffic patterns in the nuclear command systems. And when did you first suspect personnel replacement operations? 3 weeks ago, when I noticed behavioral changes in key staff members. I nodded as if satisfied with her answers, but my mind was racing. The real Cyrilla had been suspicious of personnel replacements for months, not weeks. She'd been tracking the conspiracy since before I'd even noticed the first anomalies. The woman standing next to me had just failed a basic knowledge test. We need to split up, I said. Cyrilla, you take the service tunnels and head for Colorado Springs. Try to reach the Real launch control systems. I'll take my duplicate and extract what information I can from him. That's not tactically sound, not Cyrilla replied. We should stay together. I'm not asking for tactical advice, I said, letting command authority enter my voice. I'm giving you an order. For just a moment, her mask slipped. The expression on her face was pure predatory calculation, as alien as Jarek's glassy stare. Then she smiled with perfect warmth and nodded. Of course. You're right. I'll head for Colorado Springs immediately. She turned toward the elevator, but I wasn't going to let her leave. If she was another replacement, she would head straight for the real Cyrilla and eliminate her before she could stop the secondary launch sequence. Actually, I said, on second thought, I think we should stick together after all. Not Cyrilla's hand was already on her rifle when I shot her. The bullet took her in the center of the chest, spinning her around and sending her crashing into the elevator wall. But instead of blood, the wound leaked a clear fluid that glowed with the same blue light as the tanks that had sustained the original personnel. Fascinating, Yarrick said, apparently unbothered by the violence. You identified her as a replacement faster than we anticipated. Your psychological profile suggested you would be more trusting of familiar faces. My psychological profile was wrong, I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. I'd wanted to trust her, had desperately needed an ally in this nightmare. But the text message had saved me from that weakness. My duplicate was struggling to his feet, his wounded shoulder making movement difficult. The replacement Cyrilla was designed to extract information about your support network. Her mission was to identify and eliminate anyone who might be helping you. Like the real Cyrilla, among others. Your sister Avalise, despite being extracted from the broadcast center, remains a valuable asset to us. She has access to emergency communication systems that could be used to spread counter-narratives. The threat was clear. Even if I managed to escape the facility, even if I could somehow prevent the nuclear launch, Avalise would be hunted down and eliminated to prevent her from exposing the truth. What do you want? I asked. Cooperation, Yarrick said. You walk back to the elevator with us. You accompany us to Colorado Springs. You provide authentication for the secondary launch systems. In exchange, your sister lives. And if I refuse, then she dies slowly, and the launch proceeds anyway. The wall display flickered back to life, showing a new countdown timer. 31 minutes until secondary launch authorization. The backup systems at Colorado Springs were cycling through their verification processes faster than my duplicate had predicted. 31 minutes, I said. 31 minutes, Yarrick confirmed. Enough time to reach Colorado Springs and complete the launch sequence. Or enough time for you to choose between saving your sister and saving your country. That's not a choice, I said. That's extortion. Yes, Yarrick agreed. It is. The mechanical humming that had pervaded the facility since I'd arrived was changing pitch again, but this time it wasn't synchronizing with my heartbeat. It was getting faster, more urgent, as if the building itself was anticipating the final phase of the operation. Through the elevator shaft, I could hear the distant sound of helicopters approaching the mountain. Either rescue was coming, or the conspirators were moving to the next phase of their plan. In 31 minutes, I would have to choose between my sister's life and the lives of millions of Americans. And I still had no idea how to save both. Classified Incident Report, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Date, redacted. Officer, Tavern Wren, Nuclear Launch Control Specialist. Clearance level, cosmic/compartmentalized. Audio log transcript, personal recording device number 47 Alpha. Continuation, 0947 hours. The helicopter rotors grew louder as I pressed my back against the concrete wall, my service weapon trained on both Yarrick and my wounded duplicate. The sound echoed through the elevator shaft like mechanical thunder, and I could hear boots hitting the ground outside the facility entrance. Your extraction team? I asked Yarrick. Hardly, he replied, that same artificial smile playing across his lips. Those are federal agents responding to the facility's automated distress beacon. They'll find a base full of dead personnel and compromised security systems. Another tragedy to add to the official record. They'll investigate. They'll find evidence of the conspiracy. They'll find exactly what we want them to find. Carefully planted evidence suggesting foreign infiltration, terrorist attacks, system failures caused by outdated equipment. The narrative writes itself. My duplicate coughed, dark fluid speckling his lips. The shoulder wound was worse than I'd initially thought. Whatever synthetic biology sustained these replacements, it was failing under trauma. The agents will be processed like the others, he said between labored breaths. Replaced or eliminated depending on their usefulness. The wall display flickered, showing 23 minutes remaining. The helicopters were landing now, their rotors winding down to an ominous silence that made the facility's mechanical humming seem deafening by comparison. Last chance, Tavern, Yarrick said. Come with us to Colorado Springs. Provide authentication for the launch systems. Your sister lives, and you get to witness the birth of a new America. I thought about Avalise, probably sitting in some sterile holding cell, wondering why her emergency broadcast systems had been hijacked. I thought about the millions of people who would die in the nuclear strike, the millions more who would suffer under the military government that rose from the ashes. I thought about my oath as a military officer, my duty to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. No, I said, then she dies. Maybe. But the launch doesn't happen. Jarrick's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. You can't prevent it. The secondary systems are already online. Even if you killed both of us, the backup authentication would complete automatically in. He glanced at the display. 22 minutes. Automatic authentication requires biometric verification from the original personnel, I said. That's why you need me alive. The original personnel are all dead, my duplicate said. We only need their biological signatures. The way he said it made my stomach turn. You're going to use their corpses. Fingerprints, retinal patterns, DNA samples, Yarrick confirmed. All perfectly preserved and available for authentication purposes. The launch will proceed with or without your cooperation. I was running out of options. The backup systems at Colorado Springs would complete their verification process with or without my help. The federal agents upstairs would either be killed or replaced before they could uncover the truth. And somewhere in this nightmare, My sister was being held hostage to ensure my compliance. But there was one thing the conspirators hadn't accounted for: the facility's self-destruct protocol. Every major military installation had a nuclear self-destruct system designed to prevent capture by enemy forces. Cheyenne Mountain's system was particularly sophisticated, designed to vaporize the entire complex and everything within a 5-mile radius. It required dual authorization from the base commander and the senior launch control officer. I was the senior launch control officer, and the corpse of the real Yarrick Dusk was lying in cold storage just 3 levels below. "I'll go with you," I said suddenly. Both replacements turned toward me with identical expressions of surprise. "I'll authenticate the launch systems," I continued, "but I want to see Avalise first. I want proof she's alive." "Not possible," Yarrick said. "She's being held at a secure location. Authentication first, then reunion. Then the deal's off." "Tavern, I'm not negotiating." I let my voice carry the authority I'd learned in 8 years of military service. "Show me my sister, or find another way to authenticate your missiles." Yarrick exchanged a glance with my duplicate. Some unspoken communication passed between them, too quick and subtle for me to interpret. "Very well," Yarrick said finally. "But we do this my way. You come with us to Colorado Springs. Your sister will be brought there for authentication verification. Any attempt to sabotage the launch systems will result in her immediate execution." "Understood." The sound of boots in the corridor outside grew louder. The federal agents were making their way through the facility, probably following the trail of bodies and damaged equipment. They'd reach the launch control center within minutes. "Time to go," Yarrick said, gesturing toward the elevator. I holstered my weapon and moved toward them, but my mind was racing through the facility's layout. The self-destruct system was controlled from the base commander's office, 2 levels up. The manual activation sequence required both biometric authentication and a physical key that Yarrick had carried on his person. If I could reach the real Jarrek's corpse, if I could retrieve his key and access the commander's office. "After you," I said, stepping into the elevator. The ride up was silent except for the mechanical humming that seemed to emanate from the elevator shaft itself. My duplicate slumped against the wall, his synthetic blood leaving dark stains on the metal. Yarrick stood perfectly still, his glassy eyes fixed on the floor indicator. 2 levels up, the elevator stopped. "Maintenance check," Yarrick said. "Standard protocol when the facility is under federal investigation." The doors opened to reveal a corridor identical to the one we'd just left, but this level housed the base commander's office. I could see the reinforced door at the far end of the hallway, barely visible in the emergency lighting. "Move," Yarrick said, prodding me with his sidearm. We walked down the corridor, past offices and briefing rooms that had been my workplace for 8 years. Everything looked normal, but I knew that behind those closed doors lay the corpses of my colleagues, replaced by artificial duplicates who served an agenda I still didn't fully understand. The base commander's office was locked, but Yarrick produced a key card and opened it without hesitation. The room was exactly as I remembered: polished desk, wall-mounted displays showing global defense status, and a secure safe built into the reinforced wall. "Sit," Yarrick ordered, gesturing toward the chair behind the desk. I sat down, my hands resting on the desk surface. The self-destruct control panel was hidden beneath a false bottom in the desk drawer, accessible only to personnel with command-level clearance. If I could reach it without being detected. "You're planning something," my duplicate said suddenly. "I can see it in your face. The same expression you get when you're solving a technical problem. I'm planning to save my sister. You're planning to destroy the facility." The accusation hung in the air like a physical weight. Both replacements were staring at me now, their artificial eyes reflecting the overhead lighting. "The self-destruct system requires dual authentication," I said. "Base commander and senior launch control officer. Even if I wanted to trigger it, I'd need Jarrek's biometric signature, which you're planning to obtain from his corpse. His corpse is 3 levels down in cold storage. We're going to Colorado Springs." "Are we?" Yarrick asked. "Or are you going to attempt some heroic sacrifice that accomplishes nothing except your own death?" I looked at the wall display, showing 18 minutes remaining. The backup systems at Colorado Springs would complete their authentication sequence with or without my help. The federal agents upstairs would find exactly what the conspirators wanted them to find. and Avalise would die regardless of my choices. "You're right," I said. "There's nothing I can do to stop this." "Good. Then we proceed as planned." But I wasn't giving up. I was buying time. The self-destruct system could be activated manually, but it required a specific sequence of commands entered simultaneously at multiple terminals throughout the facility. One of those terminals was located in the launch control center we'd just left. Another was in the communications array on the level above. And the third was right here in the base commander's office. If I could create enough chaos to separate the replacements, if I could reach the other terminals before the 18-minute deadline. Actually, I said, I lied. I lunged across the desk, grabbing for the hidden panel in the drawer. My fingers found the concealed switch just as Jarek's bullet shattered the desktop inches from my hand. "Step away from the desk," he ordered. I raised my hands, but I'd already activated the first terminal. The self-destruct sequence was initialized, waiting for authentication from the other two terminals. I had maybe 5 minutes before the system timed out and reset. "You cannot stop the inevitable," Jarek said. "Even if you destroy this facility, the launch will proceed from Colorado Springs. Your sacrifice will be meaningless." "Maybe," I said, "but it'll be my choice." The facility's intercom crackled to life, broadcasting in the real Jarek's voice. "All personnel, this is Base Commander Dusk. Facility evacuation in progress. Repeat, facility evacuation in progress." Both replacements looked confused. The voice was coming from the communications array, but neither of them had activated it. "Cirilla," I said. "The real Cirilla." "Impossible," my duplicate said. "She's at Colorado Springs." She was. But she's been monitoring our communications since the beginning. She knew about the self-destruct system, knew I'd try to activate it. The intercom crackled again. "Tavern, if you can hear this, I'm in the communications array. I've activated the second terminal. The sequence is running." Jarek raised his weapon, but I was already moving. I dove behind the desk as his shot sparked off the wall where my head had been. The office door was only 15 feet away, but it might as well have been a mile. "The third terminal is in launch control," I shouted. 2 levels down. You'll never reach it in time." "Then we'll die together," Jarek said. "Fine by me." But I wasn't planning to die. I was planning to live long enough to see the facility destroyed, the conspiracy exposed, and Avalise saved from whatever fate the replacements had planned for her. The wall display showed 14 minutes remaining until the backup launch sequence completed, and 4 minutes until the self-destruct system activated. I had to reach the third terminal before either deadline arrived. I had to save both my sister and my country. And I had to do it while 2 artificial beings who looked exactly like people I'd trusted were trying to kill me. The mechanical humming that had pervaded the facility since my arrival was changing again, rising to a pitch that made my teeth ache. The building itself seemed to be screaming. Time was running out. Classified incident report, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Date, redacted. Officer, Tavern Wren, Nuclear Launch Control Specialist. Clearance level, cosmic/compartmentalized. Audio log transcript, personal recording device number 47 alpha. Final entry, 1003 hours. The corridor stretched before me like a throat lined with fluorescent teeth. 3 minutes until facility self-destruct. 11 minutes until backup launch authorization completed at Colorado Springs. I was running through a maze of concrete and steel, racing against 2 different clocks that would each end the world in their own way. Behind me, Jarek's footsteps echoed with mechanical precision. My duplicate had collapsed in the commander's office, his synthetic biology finally failing, but the imposter wearing my superior's face pursued me with the relentless efficiency of a machine. His bullets sparked off the walls as I dove around corners, following a route I'd memorized during 8 years of working in this tomb. "Tavern," Cirilla's voice crackled through the intercom. "The communications array terminal is authenticated. I'm heading for the third terminal now." "No," I shouted, hoping the facility's microphones would pick up my voice. "Stay where you are. If the self-destruct fails, someone needs to survive to expose this. I'm not leaving you." "That's an order, Analyst Ash." The intercom went silent. Either Cirilla was following orders, or Jarek's people had found her. I reached the stairwell leading down to the launch control level. The emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the mechanical humming, had become a screaming symphony of grinding gears and failing systems. The facility was tearing itself apart from the inside, as if the building itself had been infected by the same conspiracy that had replaced its personnel. 2 minutes until self-destruct. The launch control door stood open, exactly as I'd left it. The third terminal waited on the far side of the room, past the shattered server towers and scattered debris from my earlier rampage. I could see the authentication pad glowing blue in the darkness, waiting for my biometric signature. I sprinted across the room, vaulting over fallen equipment and pools of synthetic blood. The terminal screen showed a single prompt: authentication required, Senior Launch Control Officer. I pressed my palm to the scanner. Authentication accepted. Self-destruct sequence confirmed. Facility destruction in 1 minute and 47 seconds. The countdown appeared on every display in the room, red numbers burning against black screens like digital funeral pyres. I'd done it. In less than 2 minutes, the entire facility would be vaporized, along with any evidence of the conspiracy. The backup systems at Colorado Springs would still complete their launch sequence, but at least this piece of the puzzle would be destroyed. Impressive, Yarrick said from the doorway, but ultimately pointless. I turned to face him, my hands raised. His weapon was trained on my chest, steady as a rock. The launch proceeds from Colorado Springs, he continued. Your sister dies. The nuclear strike eliminates the primary population centers, and the new government rises from the ashes exactly as planned. Maybe, but you won't be there to see it. I'm not programmed for self-preservation. I'm programmed for mission completion. What is the mission? I asked. Really? Not the nuclear strike, not the government takeover. What's the actual objective? For the first time since this nightmare began, Jarrek's artificial composure cracked slightly. Population reduction, resource conservation, elimination of inefficiencies, genocide, evolution. The countdown showed 1 minute and 23 seconds. Who's giving the orders? I demanded. Who created you? That information is compartmentalized above my clearance level. I know, but you're about to die anyway. What difference does it make? Jarrek's glassy eyes reflected the countdown display. For a moment, I thought he might actually answer. Then his finger tightened on the trigger. The shot never came. My secure phone buzzed with an incoming message. Then another. Then a dozen more in rapid succession, the notification sounds blending into a digital cacophony that filled the room. Avalise, Tavern, if you're reading this, I'm safe. I escaped the holding facility. Avalise, I've been broadcasting everything on emergency frequencies. The whole conspiracy. The recordings you've been making. Avalise, the backup launch at Colorado Springs has been aborted. Federal marshals have secured the facility. Avalise, real federal marshals. We ran biometric verification on everyone. Avalise, you did it, brother. You stopped them. I stared at the phone, hardly daring to believe what I was reading. But the messages kept coming. Avalise, emergency services are en route to Cheyenne Mountain. Can you abort the self-destruct? Avalise, Tavern, please respond. We need you alive to testify about what happened. Avalise, the whole world needs to know the truth. 58 seconds. No, Yarrick said, his voice distorting like a damaged recording. This is not. The mission parameters have not. Error. Error. Mission status unknown. The replacement was breaking down, his programming unable to process the failure of the larger conspiracy. He raised his weapon again, but his hand was shaking now, the artificial precision replaced by mechanical spasms. It doesn't matter, he said. Even if the nuclear strike fails, even if the conspiracy is exposed, there are others. Other operations. Other objectives. The evolution will continue. Maybe, I said, but not today. I looked at the countdown, 41 seconds. The self-destruct system had manual abort codes, but they required dual authentication from both the base commander and senior launch control officer. I was here, but the real Yarrick was dead in cold storage 3 levels down. Unless, I looked at the replacement standing in the doorway. Artificial or not, he'd been programmed with Jarrek's memories, his personality, his biometric signatures. If the system couldn't tell the difference. Yarrick, I said, we can stop this. The abort codes require both of us. I am programmed to complete the mission. The mission failed. Avalise is safe. The launch is aborted. The conspiracy is exposed. Then I am programmed to eliminate witnesses. 31 seconds. Listen to me, I said, stepping toward him. You're programmed to be Yarrick Dusk. And Yarrick Dusk was a good officer. He wouldn't let his entire command die for nothing. I am not Yarrick Dusk. No, but you're all that's left of him. Something shifted in the replacement's expression. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd served under for 3 years. The man who'd bought coffee for his subordinates during long shifts. The man who'd attended every memorial service for fallen personnel. The man who'd dedicated his life to protecting his country. The abort sequence, he said slowly. Dual authentication. That's right. We moved to the command console together. The abort system required simultaneous biometric scans from both operators, followed by verbal confirmation codes. I placed my hand on the first scanner. Authorization, Ren Tavern. Senior Launch Control Officer. Yarrick hesitated, his artificial hand hovering over the second scanner. 19 seconds. Do it, I said. He pressed his palm to the scanner. Authorization, Dusk Yarrick. Base Commander. Dual authentication confirmed. Abort sequence initiated. Facility destruction aborted. The countdown froze at 12 seconds, then disappeared entirely. The emergency lighting shifted from red to amber, and the screaming mechanical symphony faded to a low hum. We'd done it. The facility was safe. Yarrick collapsed against the console, his artificial body finally surrendering to the damage it had sustained. The mission, he whispered. The mission is over, I said. All missions end eventually. He closed his eyes and stopped moving. I stood alone in the launch control center, surrounded by the wreckage of the most sophisticated conspiracy in human history. Through the facility's communication system, I could hear helicopters approaching. Real rescue teams this time, not more replacements. My phone buzzed with another message from Avalise. Avalise, are you okay? The explosion stopped. I typed back, I'm alive. The facility is secure. How many people know the truth? Avalise, everyone. I've been broadcasting on every frequency I could access. Emergency services, news networks, social media. The whole story. Avalise, there are federal agents at 17 military bases right now, checking for more replacements. Avalise, it's over, Tavern. You did it, but I knew it wasn't really over. Yarrick had been right about one thing. There would be other operations, other conspiracies, other attempts to reshape the world through violence and deception. The people behind this had resources, patience, and a vision that extended far beyond a single nuclear strike. Still, we'd won this battle. The immediate threat was neutralized. The truth was exposed, and I was alive to tell the story. I made my way to the elevator, stepping carefully around the debris and artificial corpses that littered the facility. Behind me, the launch control center stood empty but intact, its displays showing normal operational status for the first time in days. The mechanical humming that had pervaded the facility since my arrival was finally silent. As the elevator carried me toward the surface, toward rescue and debriefing, and the long process of rebuilding trust in institutions that had been compromised by an enemy we barely understood, I thought about the question that would haunt me for the rest of my life. How many other taverns were out there, working in facilities just like this one, unaware that their colleagues had been replaced by artificial duplicates serving an agenda beyond human comprehension? How many other conspiracies were unfolding in the shadows, waiting for their moment to reshape the world? And how many times could we stop them before one finally succeeded? The elevator doors opened onto a world that looked exactly the same as it had 3 days ago, but felt completely different. I stepped into the light, carrying the weight of knowledge that some truths are too terrible to bear alone, but bearing them anyway, because that's what survivors do. End of transcript.